So first off, again, let me just once more say thank you very much for your attendance today. The intention of today's session is to simply go through the knowledge base application to gain a bit more of an understanding how it potentially works, how you can maybe utilize that, and how we actually are planning to utilize this going forward on Discover, giving you a bit more of an insight of maybe where to look for more information going forward with the new, of course, unveiling of Discover 2.0, shall we say. So naturally, especially as it's quite a quiet session today, please feel free to raise any questions you would like. Interrupt at any point if you have a question, that's no problem. And although the session has been scheduled for an hour, I don't think I'll be able to talk that much about knowledge base. So unless you have a huge amount of questions, we'll probably be finished a little bit earlier than that. Okay, let's get started. So the first thing I just want to go from when it comes to knowledge base is looking at this. In fact, let's go from the front end and get a bit of an overview first. So as you may or may not be aware, knowledge base's intention is to be sort of like a resource for your users to have information about certain, I wouldn't necessarily say processes, but maybe requirements in the business or something along those lines of how to maybe work something or anything like that. My best sort of description is usually it's a tool there so your staff members don't necessarily have to speak to their managers or team leaders about what they should be doing in a certain context. You know, the resources should be there available for them. They should be able to look in any of the appropriate categories or articles that have been created to give them information about, you know, what they should be doing at this point. Maybe it's just something as simple as how does the printer on floor 3 work? You know, it could be something as simple as that, but it's just a nice resource to have. Look for this information and have it available to you very quickly. Now, when we first look at knowledge base, we can see there's a lot of information going on here. We have a list in the middle, which is all categories as it's currently listed on the left-hand side. And this is effectively going to be all of the articles that have been created that at least the viewer, the user who is currently looking at knowledge base has access to see. So they'll obviously be able to have a variety of different information depending on what categories a person may or may not have access to. But nonetheless, effectively what we'll be seeing here is a list of all of those informative articles regardless of category. Naturally, at this point, anything that takes your interest, you can click on. That's going to take you into the article for you to read, get an overview of that, and get some information in regards to what this process or anything might be suggesting. Okay, so we can see we've got a nice article about asset register. Got a brief summary, some permissions specifying what a person can and cannot do, depending on, of course, their standing on this. Statuses that might have been created, and notifications if there is anything on here. So this is effectively all about the asset register info capture form, for instance, and it's just an overview of how that will work. And again, gaining an understanding so a user doesn't necessarily, again, have to go to their manager to say, okay, I need to fill out this form. How do I do it, for instance? Now, underneath, if necessary, you have the ability to open this up and have comments underneath where we can have something as very nicely as Barclay has ideally suggested here or shown, that you can potentially tag another person to say, oh, this would be interesting for you, take a look at this, or even just open up a conversation about the article with other users and anything along those lines. Similar, I suppose, just to a news article in that regard. Now, up at the top, depending on your sort of, again, functionality here, we have a couple of things available to us. So naturally, we can download this as a PDF. Anyone who much prefers sort of having that on their own local machine or maybe even printing it off for a paper copy, some people still prefer that. You have that ability, of course, by downloading it, doing what you need to at that point. We also have the subscribe button on the left-hand side. This is going to allow me as a user to be informed about this article. If any updates occur, if any other comments, etc., I'll be informed. I'll receive that notification or information via a notification, should I say, informing me of that. So it's allowing me to just observe and monitor this particular article. I also, and this is available to me based on a very specific permission, I have the ability here, what's called removing an endorsement. And that endorsement is currently this item up here, this yellow tick. So if I step back to knowledge base very quickly, and it wants to load, there we go, getting somewhere. We can see, of course, if I mouse over this tick, it's informing me that this has been endorsed by an expert. And I'll explain this, of course, in a bit more detail or yeah, more detail later on. But for the moment, just of course, as I said, this is showing an endorsement based on someone called a category expert. I am currently one of those for this particular category, the demo processes. So I have the ability to remove that like so, or I can, of course, just endorse the article if it hadn't been, or if it needs to be re-endorsed, for instance, something like that. And effectively, that is sort of looking at our articles, seeing the information within them and getting an understanding of what data might be there. Again, very similar, if I jump over once more to Knowledgebase on here, we of course have a list of different items. So under our Claromentis, this is where we would have a list of all of the different applications, access or information about different parts of the software itself. So something about Active Directory if needed, and then of course just all the applications listed separately as necessary. We can see we're updating these over time. And we can see, of course, that next to each one, we have a notification right now alerting you to new video guides. That's the main intention of Knowledgebase, at least from our Discover platform right now, is to have these user guides for users like yourself or anyone else who wants to see some informative content. They want to have these guides to watch later on, or even show someone else if needed. Now, another unique part of this, of course, is not just the ability to create these informative articles, but depending on, again, how you wish to set your permissions, you also have the ability to open this up to your users to be able to ask questions. And again, these questions will be reflective on certain categories that you create, and they will ideally fall within those categories. But while we're on the all category list, we'll be able to filter just to see everything that I have at least permissions to see. Now, again, these are a very useful tool, as they will effectively enable and open up to not only do you have these articles, but it might be that an article that you've created is quite informative, but it's just missing one part of that, something that this user particularly needs. They can then ask a question about that, okay? And they'll be able to then be informed, they'll have a response, and depending on how you configure those questions, you can have that response open to everyone, meaning that everyone has the ability to sort of contribute, share their ideas, have that sort of communal input. Or alternatively, again, jumping back to the category expert sort of thing with endorsements, you can leave that to the experts to be the only ones who can respond to these questions, meaning that even if people are trying to be well-meaning and informative, they don't necessarily know the answer themselves. So you're leaving it in the hands of the expert who should at least know everything about that category and the questions that might come through from it. Now, again, very similar. If I click on any of these questions, let's click on this one, for instance, we can see, of course, that a question has been posted, the ability to post comments underneath. This is an open forum, meaning everyone can discuss this. But as I mentioned, if only category experts can, it will limit that. It'll alert everyone else. The comment section will be effectively disabled for anyone who isn't a category expert. Now, on top of this, again, based on my permissions, I can edit this as you'd expect. But normally the comments are here, very similar to like the discuss component or application where we can type anything, post that, we can attach a link, a document from the document management system, or even just attach a file from our local machine if we'd want to sort of help cement and gain an understanding for that answer if we need to. And very similar to the article itself, or the articles, should I say, we also have an ability to subscribe. This is very useful for users who maybe are coming across these questions. They've seen a question and go, oh, that's actually a really good point. I would like to know how that works. And instead of having to come back again and again to see if it has been answered, they can subscribe to it, meaning they'll be informed upon an answer. They can come back to this, see that answer and go, my curiosity is sated, wonderful, or anything along those lines. Okay, so those are the main two sort of features of this. We have our articles where the content creators and sort of experts of those regions or categories will be creating and informing users about how to do certain things, what they should be doing with a process, anything like that. And then, of course, the other side of this is opening up to your actual users to contribute and ask questions, open up more curiosity and sort of respond and have different dialogues within there if needed. Now, this is all, as you'd expect, completely permission-based and very similar to the news application, if you're familiar with that. It is open to the permissions, should I say, are from a category level. So as we're currently looking at an all category sort of standpoint, we can see that if we go into demo processes, we'll get a bit of an overview potentially of what the demo processes category is all about. And underneath that, we have all of the articles and all of the questions relating to said category. So this is a good way, of course, filtering, but naturally, again, this is where your permissions are sort of defined. Very similar to the actual articles and questions as well, we also have the ability to subscribe at this point, subscribing from a category level, not just the article or a question itself, as we'll see here, what this will do. If I hit subscribe, it's going to subscribe me to the category, which effectively means that all of the existing articles and all of the existing questions I have also been subscribed to. We can see by this flag icon here. But it will also mean that I'll be updated of any new questions that are posted or any new articles that are posted. So this is obviously just a monitoring of the overall entirety of the category itself. Unsubscribing, there we go. It's going to remove those. It's going to keep this one because I'd subscribed to that previously on a manual basis, so it will remember that. But everything else has been unsubscribed as well in that regard. Okay. Now, on the right-hand side as well, we just have our recent articles and recent questions, again from a timeline, and it works exactly like the all category list effectively. We can see that although it's a smaller list, it's the exact same top 5 as we can see here. And again, that's based on a chronological order. The reason that these are effectively here are simply because if we look at potentially a home page or anything along those lines, you have the ability to create a recent questions and a recent articles. I'm not sure if there's one of those on here. No, that's fair enough. But knowledge base components, which is effectively those two windows, or those two sort of columns, should I say, on the right-hand side. Okay. And that is effectively knowledge base. We'll look at creating an article in a second to see how all the parts work and what we would potentially add, how that can effectively look. But we're just going to quickly now jump onto the admin side to see about these permissions, how we can configure them and how granular they can get. Now, before I do actually continue, Mike, do you have any questions at all?
Not directly about what we've been looking at just now. I probably have some more off-the-wall queries, but they may well be answered in the next section. So if you just carry on.
No worries at all.
Yeah, thank you.
My pleasure. Cool. Okay, let us proceed. Okay, so as I said, we're heading to the admin side of Knowledgebase, and what we can see here is an overview of the 3 different areas. So of course we have our categories, where we can see our demo processes, general, human resources, etc. And each of those, we also have a list of how many articles have been created within these, as well as how many questions have been posted within them right now. I have the ability to add a new category, or by selecting the existing category's names, I have the ability to edit that and configure some things around that as needed. Now, on top of course, the categories, from the admin side, we also have the ability to edit and configure all articles. So we can see maybe some are currently in different statuses. For instance, this one is in a draft status. So we wouldn't see it necessarily from the front end, but I can come back into this and edit it as I need to. All the other existing articles, I can choose to delete them. I can view them and I can edit them, of course, to make changes as I would, from the front end, as long as I have the appropriate permissions. But one would assume, of course, that if you are an administrator, you would potentially have the access to do so on the front end. The front end edit, though, is, of course, a little bit more restrictive because you might be able to give permissions, as we'll see in a second, to one category to enable a certain group of people to have edit rights, but not for any of the other categories, so they would be a lot more restrictive. Whereas if you are an administrator, then none of those permissions necessarily count. You have full control and can edit anything anyways. Likewise to articles, we also have questions with the exact same functionality, a list of all of the questions that have been posted, the ability to view, edit, and delete them as necessary. Searching for these, we also have the ability with keywords and category filtering, exactly the same as we had for the articles here, but this also has languages and statuses if needed. Now, we're going to come back up here and look at creating a new category. Let's call this training. And as you can see just above, we have the ability to make a parent category of this, for this, should I say, which means, of course, that we are effectively creating this as a subcategory, which is exactly how this currently works on Discover, where we, of course, have Claromentis, and underneath that, we would say that Claromentis, of course, our parent category, and underneath that, we have, of course, AD, admin, all of these different items available to us. So I have that ability as well if I want to, just selecting the relevant category I wish to be the parent, and then, of course, this will fall underneath as needed. But I'll keep this as a parent category itself. I'll keep this on the top level, and then we can have a description. Let's have a look. There we go. So this is opening up CK editor, a standard sort of WYSIWYG, if you will, allowing us to write whatever we want in here to give a context to the category. I was about to say chapter, that's not right. A category, if we need to, we can sort of write as much as we need, anything like that. And we also have the ability, very similar to the existing categories, we have the ability to add an image to this if we would really like. Let's see if there's anything currently on the server. Let's go back into files. No, nothing. Okay. So let us upload an image. Let's go for something like this. There we go. Let's just resize it a bit. Let's put it to 800 width, and of course that's adjusting the height accordingly. Okay. There we go. And then underneath that, let's just have a bit of text from my good friend Laura Mipson. And now that's just, of course, giving a description. As I said, it's context. You don't have to have an image next to this. You don't even have to write a description, but it can, of course, be quite useful. It allows you to gain a bit more of an understanding of what you might expect from this category, what information you will be gleaning from here. As we can see, if I jump over onto, again, Discover, we don't have that description. It's not a mandatory field. The only reason we have this is to subcategorize into the Active Directory, the events, the forum, everything like that. So it isn't always required. Hence why there's no asterisk here, which is always nice. But let's write this, let's put the image there. And then underneath, of course, we have our permissions. So as I said before, this is going to allow us for this particular category, not necessarily everything in Knowledgebase, but for anything created in this particular category, out of all the users, who can do what. So for instance, we can always have the all registered functionality, and then we will say that everyone has the ability to view articles posted in here. And also that means questions. They'll also have the ability to view any questions. But we can also allow them, if we'd like to ask a question. Meaning, of course, that they have that capability if they want to. Again, if the necessary information isn't exactly there for them, we're opening this up to every user to say, well, how about this? How do I do this specific thing that's not covered in the article or anything like that? Then, of course, we have the other sort of more granular or sort of content creation-y side permissions, which naturally I don't necessarily want to give to everyone. So let us add a couple of different groups and roles. So let's say the administrator role, we'll give them full control. Okay. And then we might have another group, maybe something like human resources. And anyone in the human resources group can maybe create an article. They can ask a question, maybe not edit all of them or delete any, something like that. Now, if we give people create an article permissions, but not the publish an article permissions, it means that they will have the ability, and it'll be open up for them to write some content, but it won't be able to go live until it goes to someone for approval, okay? And the people who would be sent notifications for approval are anyone with this publish an article permission, effectively. So that will send a notification to them. They will be allowed to sort of cross-reference, make sure everything's fine, and publish that article on this other user's behalf. So that's something, again, to bear in mind. You can put sort of staggered permissions in terms of a approval process, if you will. If that's something you'd like to apply on here, then of course that is possible. So we'll leave those permissions as they are. And then underneath that, we have, as I mentioned before, the Illusive category expert. Now, a category expert in terms of these sort of permissions is no different to what you've been stated here. You won't, because you're a category expert, then magically be able to create and publish articles, etc. if you're only part of your registered group, as an example there. It won't give you any more enhanced actual sort of configuration permissions, but it will, as it says, allow you to endorse the articles, which is, of course, what we saw on the front end, allowing you to sort of specify that yellow tick. The reason for this is effectively to say that, you know, when you see those endorsements, or when other users see those endorsements, should I say, it's supposed to sort of give them incentive to read at least those articles, because they know they're going to be informative, they know they're going to be useful for them, as they are endorsed by someone who is an expert. Now, of course, the only permission that you can specifically, I suppose, additionally adjust for category experts, again, as I said, is to only allow category experts to respond to questions. So by default, if you can view, you don't even necessarily need the ask a question permission. If you can view, then that comment section will be listed below any question, any article, and you will be able to communicate. If we have this, however, naturally, at least for the question side of things, that comments box is disabled unless you are the category expert, meaning that those responses are going to be from someone who is well informed on the sort of subjects and topics you might be asking questions about. So it's all bearing in mind, and I suppose it varies effectively on the different categories that you might wish to create. Some of them you might want to have open and have a quite open discussion between one another, but other sort of categories which might be around more, not necessarily sensitive business, but maybe something which has a definitive right answer. Instead of people trying to help, you might want to limit that to category experts to give the correct answers for that sort of information. When it comes to a category expert, you can't give a group like you can, for instance, these. You have to type in the user's name sort of individually, like so. But if you want to add multiple people in quite a quick sort of period, if we go to the browse, we can see that we can filter by using the advanced search function here, maybe keywords, maybe a group of people, something along those lines, maybe their role, anything like that. Something like that. Let's say the manager's role. Okay, and then you can just click everyone, so I can do that, and it's going to add them all quite quickly. So there we go. There we go. Fine with that. Those permissions look all right. Done and done. So now I'm going to add that category. Okay, so here is our new category. It's called training, as you'd expect. Well, wouldn't necessarily expect it, but I named it that, so it should be. And then hit knowledge base once more. And so we're going to head back to the front end. We can, of course, see our new category has been created. Clicking on that. There we go. It's going to give us the image that we saw and then the description underneath that. Again, just for sort of a visual flair, if you will. It's not a required item on here, but it does certainly help with, as I said, context, especially if you're keeping everything at this top level. Okay, and that is effectively, I suppose, how the admin side of these things would work, allowing you, of course, to configure, set those up accordingly. And yeah. So yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, you had a couple of questions. You were hoping the admin side might answer them. If not, would you like to go through them now, Mike?
One of the things I guess that I was going to ask about was multilingual support. We currently do have and do use the Knowledgebase, but we're way back on 7.4.
Of course.
Claromentis 7.4. We are looking to upgrade soon, and at that point, I'll probably be requesting complete clear out of our Knowledgebase and want to start from scratch because, to be honest, it's quite a mess.
Okay.
So basically, one of the things we do have and need is language support. So I was just going to see, I think I saw it on one of the previous screens, but just could you reiterate again how we can take one article and split it into, you know, English and maybe German and French and Spanish and whatever?
Absolutely. Okay, so a very good question. How that effectively works is upon creating an article, or maybe even editing an existing one if you'd like. So when we go to create an article, we can see up at the top, the first option we have is what language this is going to be created in. So bear in mind, of course, that I could put this into German, And naturally, that's not going to translate anything for me. It's not going to auto-translate any of the created content or anything like that. It will require a rewrite in the appropriate language, as naturally you're manually typing those words, everything like that. So the system can't automatically generate that and translate it accordingly. What will happen, though, is effectively when you're creating this in a certain language, like if I wanted to write the initial article or the original in German, we fill that all out. It's a German article. Once that's been submitted, as we will see, if I go back to the admin side and look at our articles here and go to edit, okay, we can see, for instance, this is an existing article. That's fine. Next to where we have our language, if we select options, okay, we have this arrow here. Nope, bear with me. Yeah, so effectively we can now set the new or the current content to this, allowing us to create this in a different language, write this in the appropriate country or language in that regard. And then what we should then be able to do, so if I update that article, view this, okay, we can see that we have the two to effectively cycle between. So I have currently, let's imagine this is all written in German. That's wonderful. Alternatively, if I would like to, I could then switch to the US International version, which will show that version of it instead, where it's all, again, admittedly written up manually once more, but in the appropriate language and translating it that way. A user doesn't necessarily have to change these out. The default, for instance, is currently set to German, but how a user can sort of automatically adjust that is in their own settings. Okay, and then in our interface, we can see that we have our language choices at this time. So if I was, say, for instance, automatically in German or US International or any existing articles, any language that an article is pre-created in, if I select that appropriate language as my general settings, which will of course change the language for hard-coded items. So if I was to change that to French as an example here, we can of course see that anything that is hard-coded into the system will automatically be translated. And when I click on that knowledge base article, I will automatically be defaulted to the French version of the article for me to read that appropriately. I'll then have the option, if I so desire, to filter between the other ones, but ideally it's going to sort me to the appropriately languaged one based on my settings here. And that's effectively how that would work. So it's all about creating, as I said, the article. Once you've done that, you can open this up into different languages. You can do them all roughly at the same time. If I go back to knowledge base, creating the article here. Okay, yeah, that's fine. This is just a little informative piece for us, which is nice, showing that, of course, I don't have permissions to publish into this category based on my actual permissions. So once I update this article or try to submit it, it's going to have to go to another person to notify. But if I go down to the training one, that, of course, is gone, naturally, because I do have full permissions for this one. And then, of course, again, as mentioned, I can write this in this current language, however I so desire, and then options. Oh, I don't want to go back to demo processes, thank you. Go to options and create the others at this time and sort of filter through them all, roughly at the same time, creating one after the other. But effectively, that's how that would work. So as I mentioned, it would require you to create that article or repeat that article multiple times, but you can have them set under the same article and have the options to filter between them or have them predetermined based on your settings.
Okay, that makes sense. You've shown me how to create the articles in different languages. Is it the same for the categories themselves?
Oh, that's a good question, actually. So the categories, unfortunately, will just fall under one. There's no language for the category naming convention, so they will all fall under the same name regardless, which is a bit of a downside, I will admit. But hopefully from that, once they go into the articles, they will, or once they select the appropriate category, they'll see that. And naturally, it does fall under sort of all categories as a default. So they don't necessarily have to filter through that if they want to read the appropriate articles to them.
Yeah. You also showed earlier the subcategory function, so you can create, when you're creating categories, you have subcategories.
Mm-hmm.
How many levels down can you go? Is that only one level down, or can you do multiple levels down?
I believe it's since I say recent, time escapes me, so it's probably about a year and a half. Oh, hello?
You've died. Your voice was breaking up just there. I missed what you said.
Oh, okay. No, I was just saying that it seems like not long ago, but it was probably about a year ago now. We did make a change to it. It was previously only 3 levels deep, so you would have a parent, then a sub-parent, and then the subgroup for that. But now it's unlimited, yes. So you can effectively create as many parent levels.
So I could have a parent level of English, a parent level of Russian, a parent level of German, and just within those have the set of various categories that I for each of those languages.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Cool.
Yeah. Are there any other differences between Knowledgebase as it was in 7.4 and the latest version 8.3? Is this, or 8.2?
It's currently 8.2, but yes, 8.3 should be.
Yeah. So, I mean, generally it seems like it operates in much the same manner, but I was just wondering if there's anything I need to be aware of in the change.
Of course, and a very valid reason to come to the call today. I wouldn't say there's necessarily anything that's overly changed now. We are looking at a couple of sort of overview changes, but effectively there is I say a lot. There's pretty much every similarity is there. So there isn't too much that has changed. I think a change which wasn't available on 7.4 is that the tags are now searchable. I don't think they previously were. But other than that, effectively, there's not too much of a difference. As well as I mentioned, with 8.2 having the pages feature instead of publish, the recent article and recent question components can both be added to your homepage or different department pages as required. So that's also quite useful. That will allow you to filter with those article and question components, specific categories as needed as well. So it's not just the general overview like this. You can filter the recent articles of human resources, as an example. But again, that's more the pages tool than Knowledgebase itself. But yeah, effectively, pretty much everything else is quite the same.
All right. Okay.
Okay.
It's certainly given me some food for thought, especially things like endorsements and the category experts that I don't know if 7.4 has, but certainly we're not using that. So definitely something to bear in mind with those.
Yeah, I think it is quite an underutilized tool, especially when it comes to the question side of things. And I think especially category experts can really help sort of drive and give a bit more information about, what articles to read. I mean, especially if you look at something like this, where there is quite a lot going on, and it's making sure that the right information is fed. I mean, all of these categories and all of these articles, should I say, are probably very useful, but some are going to be, of course, a lot more informative to the front end users, the end users there. So it's a very useful tool to utilize that. And as I said, from the question standpoint, when you can limit it only to your experts, it really does help make sure the right information is being conveyed.
Okay.
Cool.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
That's been my pleasure. Thank you very much for attending, Mike. I guess that is pretty much everything. As you said, the rest of the content is pretty much the same. We have, of course, the ability, based on our permissions, to create articles and ask questions, as long as we have those permissions. Again, that's all effectively the same there. So again, thank you very much for your time. If any other questions come in the meantime or anything like that, as I said, I'm going to, with this recording, I'm going to post it onto Knowledgebase for you to maybe review once more if needed. You can ask any questions within the category. Or if anything comes to mind in the meantime, please feel free to raise a support ticket on Discover, and we'll gladly go through that with you.
Okay, thank you very much.
My pleasure. Okay, well, have a lovely rest of the day, and take care.
Cheers. Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye now.